Greetings, fellow humans. I'm MartianBuu, and today I have for you yet another amazing tier list. This is going to be all of the quests that have come out in Hearthstone. Side quest, I think, is a pretty distinct keyword from main quest, much closer to sigils than it is to quests itself, I think. So this will be the quests and the quest lines, the main quests, the build-around quests. Again, this is a super subjective tier list based off of how cool I think the designs are. Our tiers are goated for the greatest of all time, very cool for things that I think are very cool, pretty cool for the things that I like but I don't love, mid for the things that and yuck for the things that sicken me. And with that, let's start it up. First up we have here is Sorcerer's Gambit. The order in here is going to make perfect sense, by the way. It's all going to be incredibly intuitive. As we go along, you're going to be like, oh, that's why he ordered it in that order. The real answer is I put these in and it randomly assorted them, so I'm too lazy to fix it. So we're just going to be jumping all around. Who knows which quest is next? I certainly don't. So anyways, first up, Sorcerer's Gambit. It's a quest line, so it has multiple stages. After you cast a Fire, Frost, and Arcane spell, you'll draw a card, goes on to the next one, you do that again, you get to discover a card from those types, and on the third one, you get a 5 mana 7/7 that gives you permanent spell damage +3. That was really good in Standard and got nerfed to spell damage +2 for a while, but has since been reverted. I don't have a lot of nostalgia for this card. I theoretically like the playstyle, but I didn't play a lot of Standard in Stormwind. I'm going to give it a mid just because I don't have a lot of thoughts on it. Then we have Lost in the Park, which is a really cool card. So it's another quest line. You gain 4 attack to gain 5 armor on the first stage. Then you do it again to gain 5 armor and draw a card on the second stage. Then you gain 6 attack to get a 5 mana 8/8 with taunt that gives you +8 attack and +8 armor in the same turn. When this was first released, the Demon Seed had just been released in Wild and it was very oppressive, and one of the few things you could do to counter the Demon Seed was play Lost in the Park. So that was my first introduction to this quest line and why I have a lot of fondness for it. As time went on, it actually ended up being one of the most broken quest lines because it got a lot of support in the year following its rotation from Standard. So a lot of cards that weren't intended to actually go with the quest line were released in Standard right after rotation, so it became broken throughout the following year in Wild. So just for that, I guess I'll demote it to very cool. But I do like its playstyle inherently, even if it was a little overtuned and oppressive by the end of its reign. Then we have Rise to the Occasion. So you have to play 3 unique 1-cost cards to advance each of the stages. So you do that same thing all 3 times. The first time you get a 1/4 Lights Justice. It's fine, but who really cares? The second time you upgrade your hero power. And the third time you get a 5 mana 7/7 Battle Cry. Your Silverhand recruits get +2/+2 for the rest of the game. So it's like a Quartermaster, but it's permanent. And I do love the intent with this card, but I hate the execution because you have to put so much filler garbage into your deck to make this quest line work. I really wish that the quest requirement had synergy with the quest outcome, you know what I mean? So like if this was, instead of 3 unique 1-cost cards, if it was like summon a certain amount of Silverhand recruits instead, that would be a lot more interesting because the cards you put in your deck would synergize with the final part of it. But as it is, it just felt too bad to play and I've always hated it. Another thing is like whenever I would play Odd Paladin, chat would always want me to put this in and it's like, why? Baku already upgrades your hero power. You don't need this. I don't know. That's my experience with this card. I'm going to put it in yuck just because conceptually it was so cool, but it was ruined by its execution. Then we have Command the Elements. So this is the Shaman quest line. You play 3 cards with Overload to advance the first one and it unlocks your mana crystals. Then you play, I believe, 2 cards with Overload to get a 3/3 with taunt, and then you play 2 more cards with Overload to get 5 mana 7/7 Brukan, which makes all of your spells cast twice for the rest of the game. So anyways, Command the Elements, I don't have a lot of nostalgia for it. I think I didn't like having to deal with it when it was popular in Wild. It's the type of thing that once it goes off, you just kind of explode. I do think it's fun to play, right? Like when you get the Brukan off and all of your stuff just starts casting twice, I think it's really fun. So I think I'll probably put it in mid. Just, I don't know, maybe I'll put it in pretty cool because I do kind of like it. I just don't love it. Then we have Unseal the Vault. So this is just a quest. It's not a quest line. Summon 20 minions and then you get Pharaoh's War Mask, which is a hero power that gives all of your minions +2 attack. So it's like you have Savage Roar for the rest of the game as a hero power. And I do think this one's pretty cool. I think the summon requirement was a little bit too high for wild, at least. I know that this did see play in standard. I'll give it a mid. I don't have too strong feelings about it. I don't particularly like it or love it. Lakari Sacrifice. It's so funny because everyone thought this quest was going to be broken coming into Un'Goro, and it ended up being not just not very good in Un'Goro, absolutely awful. And of the Un'Goro quest rewards, it is the only one that you would not run in a deck if you just could, right? Like if you could just run a Time Warp, if you could just run a Kaleidosaur in a deck, you would. Those are really strong cards on their own. The Portal, not all decks would do that. I think there are some that might, but at least at certain times in Hearthstone. But it's really weak. It's a really weak quest reward with a really disastrous requirement. Having to discard 6 cards for a bad card is hilarious. So anyways, this one was a design disaster. We're definitely putting that in yuck. Then we have Seek Guidance. So Seek Guidance is cool and not cool. So what you do is you have to play a 2, a 3, and a 4 cost card to advance the first one. You get to discover a card from your deck. Then you play a 5 and a 6 to discover a card from your deck again. Then you play a 7 and an 8 to get a 5 mana 7/7. She has taunt, right? Cyrella? I think she does. 5 mana 7/7 that may or may not have taunt, depending on my memory, that puts a shard into your deck. So the shard is a 10 cost spell that destroys the enemy hero. What's cool about this card is it's a win condition that is very slow. You have to play a full game of Hearthstone before you can do it. I do like that the rewards along the way are just discover a card from your deck. So like it's a good consistency card. Like you can put this in a deck and your deck isn't necessarily just about this. This was like a control priest card. You know, it helps you with some consistency along the way. And then if the game goes late enough, you get this win condition. So that all is very cool. What I don't like about it is how it encourages just curve stone. It's just curve stone. Play a 2, play a 3, play a 4, play a 5, play a 6, play a 7, play an 8. What a boring requirement. And like the fact that it's a boring requirement makes it a little flexible, but also it makes it feel really bad when you're playing off curve. So I don't know. I think I can't put it in goated for sure. Maybe I could put it in very cool. I think conceptually I want to put it in very cool. Maybe in practice I only like it in pretty cool. I definitely like it more. I feel like my feelings towards it are closer to Lost in the Park than they are to Brukan. I'm gonna move this down. I think it's pretty cool. I don't have a lot of love for this one. So yeah, I feel like this pretty cool is good for this. Awaken the Makers. Awaken the Makers, I think, is very cool. This before Renathal, it was the only way to have higher max health than you could start a game with, which was really exciting. I do think that the requirement on the quest has always been pretty restrictive. Like I would have liked something slightly more. I don't want something so flexible that it's just play a 2, play a 3, play a 4, but something in between this and Seek Guidance as far as like flexibility would have been nice. I would have liked to be able to play a little bit more Amara, because like what do death rattles have to do with setting your health to 40? So anyways, I do really like this quest. I don't really like the requirement. I guess I really like Amara, but I don't like having to build my deck for death rattles, because like death rattles have become so bad over the years. Especially what Amara does, it's a 5 mana 8/8. Does Amara have taunt? Amara has taunt, right? And she sets your health to 40. So you'll be at 40, and if you play Reno Jackson, you'll go back to 40. Then we have the Marsh Queen, which is another one of the Un'Goro quests that everyone thought was going to be amazing, but it ended up being absolute trash. So much like the Paladin quest line, it has play 7 1-cost minions. You don't have to pay 9, and they don't have to be unique within their tier like you do with the Paladin quest line, but having to play 7 1-cost minions, especially back then, was a really tough requirement. You had to fill your deck with really bad cards in order to play 7 full ones. So that requirement has always been really bad. Queen Carnosa is a 5 mana 8/8 that shuffles, was it 15 initially? I think it was 15 Raptors into your deck. They're 1 mana 3/2s that draw a card. She was buffed. I think she has Rush now. She shuffles more in, something like that. Not that that made a difference. But anyways, this was part of why I didn't like the Paladin quest line so much, is we learned from this quest that having to play a ton of 1-cost things does not make a good deck. So we'd already learned that lesson, and then the Paladin questline had a more restrictive version of that. The Paladin questline wasn't just play 7/1 costs. It was play 9, and some of them had to be unique. So anyways, I do think Queen Carnosa is cool. When you actually played her and they shuffled things in, it was fun, but the requirement was so bad that it made it hard to play, and the requirement was so boring that it made your deck boring to play. So I'm gonna put it in mid just because the payoff could have been really cool. It's just held back by its power and its lameness within the requirement. Bizarre Burglary. So this one I think is really fun. What I really liked about this one is they were starting to do thief cards where you just had to steal the cards. You didn't have to actually play terrible cards to activate your thief card. And I thought that was really nice. That's a huge improvement over having to actually play every thief card to activate your thief payoffs. And I like the idea of having a fiery war axe as a hero power. So that's pretty cool. Whenever standard gets a new round of thief cards, I always try to make Bizarre Burglary work. So I know that I really like it, but it is also one of those ones where the power just isn't there. It's always like slightly behind where it needs to be to actually see some play. So especially now that Obsidian Shard has been changed to only require you to steal the things instead of play them, this card just like isn't relevant. The new tourist card in the next expansion, you don't have to do anything to complete this. Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe this will be cool with tourists, but yeah, I'll put it in pretty cool. Next up, we have Untapped Potential. Untapped Potential is fun. I've heard some complaints about the ease of the quest requirement, which I mean, like, whatever. It was just really fun to be able to play all those choose ones for both their effects. In Year of the Dragon, I actually didn't play a lot of standard, and I jammed a bunch of standard for this deck, and I thought it was really fun. Also, there was like a, I think they called it ROM Druid after a player who like put the deck together first. It was Barnes and what? What did the Barnes find? Oh, it found Gadgetzan Auctioneer. So it was a Barnes Gadgetzan Auctioneer deck. You would play Untapped Potential, and it was Jade Druid. So you would power through your deck with the Barnes Gadgetzan Auctioneer combo. Was it that or was it Kaleidosaur? It was Kaleidosaur. It wasn't, because I was like, I know you put draw cards in there. Yeah, okay, it was Kaleidosaur. I take it all back. So you would Barnes and then Kaleidosaur when Kaleidosaur would reduce spells to 0, but before it was rebuffed later on. And use the Jades and Untapped Potential to like shuffle and get a dude at the same time. And then so you'd play a couple Jades for 1 and get to use, what's the 7, it's like Overflow, right? The 7-cost spell that you draw 5 and heal 5 from both heroes. You do that in Ultimate Infestation and Nourish, and you just get to power through your deck that way and not have to make the choice with the Jades. You'd get the tempo and you'd get the value at the same time. So that deck was really cool. I think Untapped Potential, should I put it in very cool? I should. Raid the Docks. Raid the Docks is every player's favorite quest. I know everyone loves pirates. They love getting wrecked by pirates, and they love infinite value that doesn't require any resources. So obvious goated. Where is it? We're going to put it straight to goated and not talk about it any farther. So this was one of the trio of oppressive decks in Stormwind and Wild. It was even Reno Warlock, Pirate Warrior, and Questline Hunter were like the only 3 decks that were worth playing for a while. It was also very good in Standard at the time. And it's going to go down in history as like the easiest deck to play of all time. Because like not only is it just like playing out pirates on curve, but it has a script, you know. Play 3 pirates, play 2 pirates, play 2 pirates. It's so basic. And then it's the final reward. So the first one, you draw a weapon, so you would put just Ankar in your deck, so you would always have Ankar on 3. I think all 3 stages have been nerfed to requiring 3 pirates. I'm pretty sure that's the current state of it, but initially it was 2 and 2 for the second 2 stages. So 2 pirates after this stage, and it would just deal 2 damage to 2 random things randomly on your opponent's side of the field. And then 2 more pirates, and you would get Rokara, who would summon a dormant thing called the Juggernaut. And the Juggernaut was at the beginning of your turn, put a random weapon in play, summon a random pirate, and deal 2 damage twice, just like the previous stage of the quest line. So that instead of that being once you got there, it was every turn. Wild had so many 1-cost pirates that you could just power through this questline really fast. It wasn't even a late game win condition. You would play Rokara on 5 like every single game, and then you'd have a bunch of completely free random infinite value. And so it was really hard for a lot of late game decks to overcome this. Kind of like what Heavens was saying, mirrors are miserable. The reason I didn't like this more is because the mirror was one of the most frustrating experiences of all time. Not only was your opening hand, like, it really mattered that you got a bunch of cheap pirates in the beginning, but you had all of these cannon shots firing off at random things, and depending on what they hit, the game could just be over at any point. 2 went face, leaving up 2 big threats on board when either one of them going down would have been swinging back to you. You know, just like there's all these scenarios where the random cannon fire was just flipping matches completely. It was RNG fest. So anyways, very RNG heavy. People always talk about like the smite high roll off of the Juggernaut, right? To me, that was less bad. Like at that point, it's a random mess anyway. But yeah, I mean, that's a factor. So intense randomness, basically no skill expression. Like, I don't know. I almost want to put it in mid just because like I do think the Juggernaut is kind of a flashy effect on paper. I remember being excited for this card when it was revealed, but like in practice it's so boring. Then we have Supreme Archaeology. So this one's a little boring effect wise. You have to just draw 20 cards, but the reward is really fun. So it's kind of like Seek Guidance in that way, where like the payoff is so fun but the requirement is a little mundane. Unlike Seek Guidance, your payoff would matter every game. You would get to your payoff and it would be fun. In particular, one of the things I really liked with this was Cthulhu the Shattered. You would power through your whole deck and get the reward. Then you would complete Cthulhu. It would be the only card in your deck. You'd press the hero power and you'd have a 0 cost Cthulhu to deal the 30 damage to your opponent's face with. So that was a lot of fun. I do think I'll put this in very cool. I liked it a lot. Then we have Activate the Obelisk. So this one's restore 15 health and then you get Obelisk Eye, which is a hero power that gives something +3/+3. Give a minion +3/+3. Did it also restore it to full health? I feel like there was some kind of healing element to it. Yeah, it heals. It just healed it completely, whatever it targets. So yeah, it gave a minion +3/+3 and it would heal it. It heals, and if it's at full health, give it +3/+3. Oh, okay. It heals for 3, and if it's at full health, it gets +3/+3. Okay, that all makes more sense. I was like, wow, that sounds really broken. Is that really what it did? Anyways, my biggest impression of this card was doing free-to-play runs at the time, and most of my opponents being priests with this effect. I think it was one of the free decks for new and returning players at the time, and most people would just pick this one. So I think to casuals, it was really exciting. As someone who never played during this era, it's crazy to you how hated this quest is. Like, is it iconically hated? I just think it's a little boring. I'm gonna put it in mid. Like, I don't have any strong feelings about it. I was never excited to play with it. Playing against it was fine. Then we have Find the Imposter. So this one, you would have to play 2 SI7 cards. So an SI7 card just has SI7 in the title. And then you get a Spy Gizmo, which was a group of really good cards that were unique to this quest. One would like return something to your hand. One would give something stealth and some bonus attack. I think it was +2. It was like 5 or 6 different gizmos. And you would get one of them when you played the first one. Both of the first 2 steps were the same, right? It was play 2 SI7s, get a gizmo, play 2 SI7s, get a gizmo. And then the third one was play 2 SI7s, and you got Scabs, who was a 5 mana 7/7, and you would get all the gizmos. So the first 2 steps were random, and then the third step, you would get all of them. And you could like return the Scabs to your hand and do it again. It felt like a very straightforward quest. And I think I regret not playing this more when it was standard legal, because this was never going to be good in wild. I do like it conceptually. I think in practice it was cool too. I'm going to put it in pretty cool because like obviously it wasn't enough to get me to play standard. Then we have Unite the Murlocs, which is boring by today's standards, but at the time, giant volumes of random was much harder to come by, like didn't happen as often. So this was summon 8 Murlocs and you get Megafin, which was a 5 mana 8/8. Fill your hand with random Murlocs. And what's nostalgic to me about this quest particularly is it's the first time I ever got to Legend with a deck I completely made myself. So in Frozen Throne Wild, one time I just put this in a deck and then typed Murloc into the search bar and started adding all the Murlocs that I think didn't suck. And when I got to 30, by the way, Neptulon was among the cards I put in this deck. And then I just started queuing Wild and I actually made it to Legend with just, you know, Murloc good stuff. So that's why I like that card. I mean, it's never been great, right? Like I just have that one fond memory of it. So I'm gonna put it in pretty cool. And again, it's just, you know, like it's just Murloc cards. So it's not like it's that exciting. Then we have Open the Waygate. How do you guys feel about Open the Waygate? This is a very polarizing card. I think if this was a power tier list, it would be one of the only 2 in GOATed. Like if this was a power tier list. This is an I like it tier list. So, you know, it doesn't get to go straight to goated. In 2019, I guess like rewind to 2018, I thought Boomsday Project was really boring. Part of what made the year previous so fun for me is because Wild had just become distinct from Standard. So I would get to Legend in one and then go and get Legend in the other, and I would have a completely different experience depending on which one I queued. There was a lot of variety in Hearthstone for me at the time, so I was getting double Legends all the time. This was before they made getting to Legend trivial. So like it was harder back then. It took me more time. So getting 2 Legends a month was like a good amount of Hearthstone for me. Then in Boomsday Project, both modes became Odd Paladin and Odd Rogue, which shared a bunch of common cards. My experience between Standard and Wild was very homogenized because of those two. So by the end of Boomsday Project, my enthusiasm was really low. It was really boring. Rostakon's Rumble came out, and it was actually kind of a big switch up. Specifically, the like triple win condition druid was really fun and new. 6 days into Rostakon's Rumble, the switch up that was revitalizing the game for me, everything about those decks got nuked. And it went right back to Odd Paladin, Odd Rogue times. So that was the end of the great era of Martian spamming Hearthstone constantly off stream. So my enthusiasm got destroyed by 2018. So in 2019, I didn't play that often. There were a couple months where I skipped getting Legend completely. On most of the rest of the months, I think I got like 2 Standard Legends that year. One of them was Awaken the Makers. The other 10 months where I did get at least Wild Legend, it was almost exclusively with Quest Mage. So back then, the quest was easier to complete, so it was only 6 spells. You would have to pay 6 spells and you get Time Warp, and Time Warp could be copied. If you could cast it multiple times, you would get 2 extra turns. But the cards you would have to use to activate the quest were a lot scrappier. So what happened is we got the Cyclone card, the 2 for 2/2 elemental, and Sorcerer's Apprentice was still a 2 mana 3/2. You would try to complete the quest and then on the extra turn have set up a Flame Waker so that you can deal a bunch of damage with all of your random stuff. That deck was really fun for me. I don't like to throw around skill expression that much. It gets thrown around a little too loosely these days, in my opinion. Anyways, there was a lot of potential for skill expression with it. So it was very fun and repeatable. So the fact that Quest Mage existed was the only reason I was playing constructed Hearthstone in 2019. That's the point of this story. And I have a lot of nostalgia for the quest back then. I will say also, though, playing against Quest Mage is one of my all-time least favorite experiences in Hearthstone. So it was propping up my love for Hearthstone for a whole year. It was also in the years after, like Ash's Quest Mage, which is like the most benign version of Quest Mage after that, was the most horrible experience of that time. But comparing that to the more recent ones, like the Parrot Quest Mage and the Ramoth Quest Mage that followed it, I'd much prefer that to those. Anyways, so it's mixed opinions. I feel like the argument that you want cards to invoke strong feelings in players, you want to inspire passion, right? Everyone thinking a game is okay is not going to keep people coming back. You want people to love and hate things because the people who love the game will come back. And I think Open the Waygate is one of the greatest to ever do it in that regard. There's no, like, is there a more iconically polarizing card than this? I don't know. I have a lot of personal nostalgia for it. It had like the, when it first came out, it was actually really tough to complete because random spell generation wasn't as easy. So like there were a lot of years before this became Omega quote unquote toxic. Super iconic card. I had like a whole year of my Hearthstone joy being carried on its back. And I think for me, it's goated, even if it deserves every nerf it's had. Then we have Hack the System. Hack the System is a really cool idea, I think. So you have to attack 5 times, and then you get the Potatoes Core, which is a hero power. It's a 2 for a 4/3, and every time you attack with your hero, you can refresh it and get another 2 for 4/3. The problem is attacking 5 times is a huge requirement. Going -1 card in hand, you know, the payoff has to be huge to make up for that downside. And the payoff isn't enough to make up for having to swing 5 times. I don't even know what I would put this at. 2 times? For today, you could just start with that hero power and it still might not even be enough. But like when it came out, I think for this to be good, you had to lower it to like 3 at least. So anyways, I do like it in concept. I think that the power level is just too low for it to even be fun, so I had to put it in mid. But if the power level was enough that you could even like meme around with it a little bit, I think it would have made pretty cool. And then we have the Demon Seed. The amount of health you need to pay to advance the quest has changed over the years. But anyways, you have to deal damage to yourself on the first 2 steps, and the reward for each of those is to deal 3 with lifesteal. Then you have to deal damage to yourself again on the 3rd step, and you get a 5 mana 7/7 that makes it for the rest of the game. If you would take damage on your turn, your opponent takes it instead. This card is responsible for one of the worst times in Wild ever. When Stormwind came out, Wild was just not a good place to play because of this card. It wasn't the only problem. This got banned in Wild, and Stormwind was still the worst time in Wild to date because of the other things that were legal in Stormwind. So it's not like this is the only problem with Stormwind. I can't give it all that. I think conceptually it is cool though. I think it's had a very negative effect on Hearthstone, on Wild Hearthstone specifically, like a net negative. Definitely on Wild Hearthstone specifically, but the concept is cool. I do think it also took one of the most interesting decks that has ever existed, Darkglare Warlock, and made it into a boring deck. So that's another negative for it. If I was going to rate this on flavor, I might even rate it in goated. But like, it ruined Wild, and it like took a really cool deck and ruined that too. Do I even put it in yuck? Do I wish this didn't exist? I've had some really good time playing Demon Seed since it wasn't banned. I actually kind of like it. I think I can't put it in yuck. I know that a lot of people want it in yuck, because I don't blame you. I think that it's had a very net negative effect on Hearthstone. I don't think it had to be that way. I think it could have been different if it was like designed a little differently. What did Darkglare do before this? It was just about getting giants out. You didn't have that inevitability. You know, like you had finite resources with Darkglare before that. So you had to kind of like manage. This is Omega Easy Bait comments for YouTube. Oh, so you think I should put it in like pretty cool? I like it in pretty cool because I do think it's pretty cool. I think that there's like, I think there's an argument for Demon Seed to be in any of these tiers, quite frankly. I'll put it in pretty cool. Then we have Making Mummies. So you have to play 5 reborn minions, and then you get Emperor's Potatoes, which gives you a 2/2 copy of a minion you have in play. Can it target enemies? I forget. Is it just your minions, or can it hit enemy minions too? Summon a 2/2 copy of a friendly minion. Okay, it's a friendly minion. All right, so it would give you a 2/2 copy of a friendly minion, and that has synergy with the requirement, because getting a 2/2 of a reborn is a lot of value. So I think this card is cool. I like that the 2/2 it summons isn't very threatening on its own, so you have to like pack your deck with minions that will still be good as 2/2s and also still advance the quest, and there's like a nice balance there. I think the reborn minions have just been slightly too terrible for this card to ever be good, and it's crazy. So it's been like a year and a half since reborn became an evergreen keyword, and it still hasn't manifested in Wild. All this needs to be good in Wild is good reborns. And like reborns just suck generally, especially neutral ones. So anyways, I feel like I really like the design of this card, but it just hasn't had the right tools to be good. I'm gonna give it pretty cool instead of very cool for that reason. Then we have Jungle Giants, and Jungle Giants is a very funny quest. So you have to summon 4 5-attack minions, and once you do, you get Barnabas, which is a 5 mana 8/8 that doesn't have taunt, right? I feel like it should, but it doesn't. And it makes it so that every minion in your deck costs 0. The problem is summoning 5-attack minions is actually tough even still in 2024. If this was ever easy, it would get played. The card that iconically goes with this is Curse Disciple. So it's a 4 mana 5/1 with Death Rattle, summon a 5/1. So you would play a Curse Disciple, or you would get one off of Oaken Summons. That would be half the quest requirement. So you've played Curse Disciple, and your quest still isn't online. That sets you back. What's really funny about this one is Faceless Manipulator worked with the quest at first, and this was a decent deck in Standard that people were bringing to tournaments. And right before a major tournament, they changed the interaction. So in between locking in your deck list for the event and the event taking place, they changed the interaction with Faceless Manipulator so that it no longer advanced the quest. And at first, players weren't allowed to change their list. They almost didn't get to change their list. This was a major event. People had to complain to get them to change the policy. So that's like what's iconic about Jungle Giants is that happened. So yeah, the deck was terrible after that. It really needed the Faceless Manipulator to complete the quest. I think this deck is beloved. I had a video on it back in the fall that did really well. And I think it's fun too. Like the Brontosaurus's name is Barnabas. It's pretty funny. So yeah, I've had some fun with this. I like the big funny meme deck was Ragnaros, Carnivorous Cube, Faceless Manipulator, Deathwing. So like you would get a Ragnaros in a cube, then you would copy the cube with Faceless Manipulator, then you would Deathwing, destroying the cubes and all of your opponent's minions out, leaving you with 4 Ragnaros and your opponent's face. You would introduce them and they would have a good time. So I like that. That was a pretty fun meme deck. I think this is pretty cool. I like Jungle Giants. Are we noticing a theme? I guess I like Druid quests. Then we have Final Showdown. So this one is you draw cards in a turn, and then the cards you've drawn are reduced by 1. So the first stage is 4, the second stage is 5, both with the same thing. So like the cards drawn are 1 less. Then the final reward, you draw 6 in a turn, and you get a 5-mana 7/7 Kurtrus. For the rest of the game, cards you draw cost 2 less. I think I did actually have a lot of fun playing this once it started to get good in Wild. I didn't play the standard versions very much. I think it didn't sink in how to play the quest right. In Stormwind, I didn't pay a lot of attention to standard. And it's really funny to look back on that time because of how bad Wild was. I didn't give standard any attention during that time. I really should have. But anyways, once it was good in Wild, I think it was fun. Like the Brutes got unnerved and the Whopper, not the Whoppertinger. What is that thing called? The 7-mana 4/4. Is it a 4/4? It's a 5/5, isn't it? Anyways, Walloper? Is that what it's called? Yeah. Brutes and the Wallopers. The deck had a lot of synergy, which felt really nice, and you get to explode out a bunch of stats, which was really fun. And you could steal your opponent's deck, which was pretty fun with Tony. So it was a lot of fun to play. It was a little miserable to play against, but not like the most miserable I've ever had. Like this was one of the pair of decks, this and Questline Druid, were one of the pair of decks that kind of ruined the first season of Twist. But even then, like I feel like this deck was the most fun it's ever been in Twist, as far as like the Wild version of the deck. I can't speak to the Lifesteal Demon Hunters that were played in Standard. They sound more fun. Anyways, Questline Demon Hunter, I think I like it, but I don't love it, so we'll put it in pretty cool. Then we have Fireplume's Heart. Play 7 taunt minions, then you get Sulfuras. Sulfuras was a 3 for 4/2 weapon that changed your hero power to be a rag effect. So for 2, you would deal 8 to a random enemy. And that was really fun in Standard. This was actually my second legend ever. My first legend was Grim Patron Warrior, and then I didn't bother with legend. I spent the next like period of time trying to just get all my classes to 500 wins. And trying to get Priest to 500 wins did not a legend make back then. So I didn't really worry about legend until I ran out of classes to get golden. And that was around this time again. And I had a lot of fun playing Taunt Warrior. It was nice, fun, control warrior. You would play a lot of taunt minions, and then you get to shoot a bunch of rag bolts. I think one of my most fun times playing Standard, at least that year. Pretty nostalgic for that deck. I'm sad how much it's fallen off. Like it, there's no saving it. There haven't been the cheap taunts necessary to complete the quest in time and Wild, but I did really love that deck. I feel like this is the only reason they still push Taunt Warrior to this day. It's really funny because like the reason that this is fun wasn't because you were playing taunts, it was because you got the rag hero power. Like who cares about Taunt Warrior otherwise? Then we have the last Kaleidosaur. Are you guys gonna be upset with me if I don't put it in Goated? It has the iconic like Brian Kibler song, which everyone likes, and I do think the effect was cool. Every time I've had a deck that could like consistently get out the Kaleidosaur, I've had a really fun time with it. I do like playing the Kaleidosaur. I do think if I'm gonna put this in Goated, it would just be for the culture, and I think for the culture I'll put it in Very Cool, because I also think it's very cool. But it's not like, for me, it's not like one of the greats. Make a vid with this quest when the expansion comes out, please. Maybe I should, because like I should play more Jungle Giants and more Kaleidosaur, because they did really well on YouTube the last 2 times I did them. Then we have Corrupt the Waters, which I do like a little. I had a lot of fun with this with some weird Jade Shamans, kind of around the Barons time. I would use it to kind of go infinite with Shutterwalk and Barista. I didn't do Grumble because I didn't want to return a bunch of Jades to my hand. I wanted to return just the Shutterwalk. So I made like some Jade Shamans that were fun to play for a while. I thought that was really funny. The biggest thing to me about this card, so I gotta tell you guys, you need to understand this. YouTube, you need to understand this, please. Corrupt the Waters isn't good. It's terrible. Even in the standard of its time, it was bait. The best version of like Galakrond's Shudder Shaman was the one that didn't play this. It's not a good card. It's a really fun card. I agree with you there. I'm right with you there. If you play Tour Guide and you do a bunch of other whatevers, you can set up a situation where whenever you play Shudderwock, it will not whiff. It will always bounce itself back. And my YouTube comments can't get over that. So it is much more effective for creating wins for yourself to not go -1 in hand in the beginning and just take the L when every once in a while Shudderwock does not bounce himself back to your hand, because Shudderwock's probably going to bounce himself back to your hand. And in situations where he doesn't bounce himself back to your hand, you probably didn't need to go infinite with Shudderwock anyway. There's just no justification as far as getting maximum wins to play Corrupt the Waters. That's the point. I made this short where I just thought it was funny. It was when Nathria came out, I was playing a Shudderwock deck that had 4 different ways to copy Shudderwock for the fun of it, not because I thought it was good. I was running 2 Serenites and I was running 2 Twin Fins. And I played all 4 of them, and I played a Zola. And I was in a position against a priest to where it was time I had to play the Shudderwock. And so I did. I was like, if Zola happens first, something like that. And the Zola came down first. So I didn't get to copy my Shudderwock. And then my opponent played Shadow Reaper Anduin, destroying all of my Shudderwocks. So if it had happened in any other order, I would have won that game. I would have gone infinite with my Shudderwocks. But because it happened in the specific order that it did, I got wrecked. And I thought that was funny, so I made a short out of it. And I think a lot of people agreed. I think a lot of people thought it was funny. But for like the following 2 years, every once and again, I would get a comment on it like, well, this is why you run Corrupt the Waters and blah, blah, blah. I would rather win all the games that I won outside of the random L I took than not take that 1 L and lose a bunch of games just because I always had 1 less card in my hand than it should have. So anyways, YouTube, please understand this card isn't good. I do think it's very fun, so I'll put it in pretty cool. But I almost want to put it in yuck. You know what, YouTube? That's what you get. That's what you get. I'm putting it in yuck to spite you. You did this. It could have been a pretty cool card, but you made it cringe. Then we have Defend the Dwarven District. So this one was deal damage with spells twice to make your hero power be able to target minions. Then deal twice to make it cost 0. Then deal twice to give you Potato Master Tavish, who would be 5 mana 7/7, and make it so that every time you cast a spell, your hero power would refresh. So it was like Anduin Raza all in one tight little quest line. Conceptually fun, and it did end up getting nerfed for standard and not unnerfed because of its effect on wild. But as I said before, it was one of the 3 decks in Stormwind that after Demon Seed was banned, stepped in to be the oppressors. So a lot of people have a lot of negative association with it for that. I'm among them. But of those decks, it was actually kind of fun to play. It was a bit of a new experience, and it was like Raza Priest had become too terrible to play, so if you were a fan of that deck, you could at least have a similar style with this one, even though it was much more compressed. So in Wild, it was Odd Hunter, so you would have the 3 damage hero power. The deck had like 24 cards that were worth playing, so you had to put in 5 filler cards. It was like 5 filler cards in Baku. So your deck had like 6 bricks. But it was so strong, it kind of made up for it. I think for its negative impact on Wild, I can't put it above mid, but I'm not going to put it in yuck because I do think it was a little fun to play. In fact, I'm even going to put it in pretty cool. It was pretty cool. Caverns Below. Fun fact, there was not always duplicate protection in Hearthstone. And I opened this 5 times without a complete Ungoro set. And I dusted them all before it got nerfed. This was play 4 minions with the same name, and then you would get the Crystal Core, which was a 5 mana spell. Your minions are all 5/5s for the rest of the game. And so you would use this to bounce like Novice Engineer when it first came out to activate it, and then you would deckhand Stone Tusk Boar your opponent until they died once the quest was online. And it was one of the first decks with crushing inevitability. So like it showed up with a sub 50% win rate on the stat sites because it was a little hard to play. Not like it was hard to play, but it wasn't a curve stone deck, you know. Like I don't think it was especially taxing, but it like for a Hearthstone deck, it was pretty hard to play at the time. But more than that, it got crushed by very proactive decks. So like aggro decks beat this really easily. But if you were playing a slower deck, there was nothing you could do about it. It had so much inevitability, you were almost certainly going to lose. And that's why this quest was so hated at the time. is because you had to either play aggro or accept that every time you ran into this deck, you would lose. So this got several nerfs. It got like a couple direct nerfs while it was in standard and a few indirect nerfs. I remember it stayed nerfed when it went to wild. It took a couple years of nerf amnesty before they actually set it back. But I remember people would always ask me, do you think they should revert it? And I was like, well, I would say it's probably not going to be as good as it was in standard. It was never good in wild while it was legal in standard, not once. It was always bad in wild. Wild was too fast for it, but it's not worth the risk. Like, I knew how bad it felt to play against this deck, so I thought like, no, you shouldn't do it. It's not worth the risk. And then they finally did unnerf it completely. It wasn't good for a whole year. I was like, wow, it turned out fine. I'm glad they unnerfed it because it turned out fine. And then in Alterac Valley, it started being good and it was a miserable play experience. And I was like, see, it wasn't worth the risk. But now obviously it's whatever. Like, Hearthstone has gone past. There's been too much inevitability stuff to care about an effect like this anymore. How do I feel about Cavern's Blow? I think I'll put it in mid. I do think it was fun to play, at least in spots. I've definitely liked this a couple of times, but I guess I've hated it more often than that. And I've never loved it. I've liked it. So I'll put it in mid. Then we have Raid the Sky Temple, which is cast 10 spells to get a hero power where you discover a spell and it costs you less. It's like a slightly boring requirement for a slightly boring outcome. Was this even good in standard ever? I don't want to put it in yuck, I guess. I guess I'll put it in mid, because like there's nothing offensive to me about this card, but like it's not even exciting enough to play, right? All right, let's order them up. That's all of them. That's all the quests. So yeah, I guess that's the right order. That's the right order. Then yep. I think that's good for that tier. Pretty cool. I think that's the highest of the pretty cools for me. Then maybe switch these two, but otherwise good. Demon Seed, Unite the Murlocs. I really do favor things I can play and enjoy, you know, like things that don't suck aggressively. The hero power wasn't Discover, really? It's just awful? What is it called? It's called Ascendant Scroll. If it's not Discover, it's going in yuck. That's awful. Add a random mage spell to your hand. It costs you less. Ugh, terrible. All right, I take it back. That tells you how often I've played it. Discover would have been fun, I guess. I guess I can go at the top of yuck because it's like one of the least offensive. This is awful. Yucky play experience. YouTube comments. Design that makes me sad about an otherwise cool effect. The mids are always hard to order because I feel very mid about them. I guess I'll put this at the top. This has a T-Rex attached to it. Hack the System's kind of funny. This was good. Yeah. All right. How'd we do? Scale from yuck to goated. How's the tier list? Very cool. All right. That's how you know. That's how you know this is the best tier list ever, because it's very cool. I think one of the big issues with quests and mana cheat and burst damage is not all classes get the same type of tools at the same strength at the same time. So it feels like a lot of classes are trying to play old Hearthstone, while the other half of the classes are trying to play a newer, more fast-paced Hearthstone. And I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons why the quote-unquote control enjoyers and the aggro/combo enjoyers are at odds so much of the time, is because there are two types of Hearthstone that are getting supported disproportionately at any given moment. So that really extends to quests, I think, and why a lot of people didn't like the quest lines so much from Stormwind. I think if all of the quest lines enabled a similarly fast-paced game with similarly game-ending potential, a lot of people would have liked it more, but it really was just, you know, half of a handful of them that were turbo cracked. So if you didn't like those classes, it was hard to get on board. I do think I'm somewhere in the middle. I even remember in Classic, one of my least favorite things about Hearthstone was how short the games were. I was used to Pokemon, which at the time was a lot longer than it even is today, and so matches being over so fast made it a little less exciting for me. But the way control decks are now is random value piles, right? Like you never run out of gas, and a lot of your value generation is generated cards. So it's not like you have a finite deck that you need to manage the resources of and come out on top. You just identity theft and Sister's Falna to get more and more random stuff until your opponent just doesn't have enough cards to compete with you anymore. So I think it's really valid that the people who like the quest lines for how much they shortened the overall game to feel that way. In general, games like Hearthstone really need to capitalize on the mobile audience to stay profitable, and the mobile audience isn't the audience that wants to stick around for like half an hour and really grind out a game. That's much more of a PC game type of thing to do, and Hearthstone is never going to stop catering to that audience. So I will say I'd rather all of the classes get faster than some classes still pretending that it's 2015 while the other ones are all in 2024, you know what I mean? I guess I don't have a very firm point with all of this, I'm just blabbing.